My son gave me two choices: serve his fiancée or give him all my savings. I chose a luxury senior home. The tea went cold again. I hadn't meant for it to. I'd brewed it just the way I like 1 spoon of Earl Grey, a dash of milk, no sugar. But the steam had stopped rising some time ago. The cup sat untouched on the windowsill, right beside the stack of envelopes I no longer had the energy to open. I stared out at the rain threading its way down the glass Oregon gray and constant, and wondered if it had always been this quiet in my home, or if the silence was just louder now. My name is Eleanor, I'm 69 years old, and I've lived in this same little yellow house in the outskirts of Eugene since before my son could walk. It's got old bones and creaky stairs, but it's mine. Was mine. Still is, I suppose, at least on paper. Funny how we say my house, my savings, my life until someone younger, taller, and louder comes in and starts asking questions that sound like commands. I had set the table for 2. I'd even pulled out the good cloth napkins, the ones with the stitched edges that I only use when I feel like reminding myself I once cared about Sunday lunches. I made pot roast his favorite, the house filled with the smell of onions and rosemary and something else, anticipation maybe. Or maybe dread. He arrived 20 minutes late, which I expected. My son doesn't do on time unless there's a boardroom or a best man speech involved. But when he walked through the door, he didn't smell like wind or cologne like he used to. He smelled like car leather and expensive urgency. He hugged me like someone clocking in for a shift, said, "Hey, Ma," the same way someone might say drive through or dine in, and then set his phone face up on the table, notifications already blinking. I tried not to notice how little his eyes landed on anything here. Not the family photos, not the quilt I made when he left for college, not even the roast. Just his phone, and his thoughts, which clearly were somewhere else entirely. But I noticed. I always notice. He didn't even take off his coat, and as I poured the tea, fresh steaming, he cleared his throat. "There's something we need to talk about," he said. I thought it might be about his wedding. The one he was planning with a woman who called me Elle the first time we met, as if my name was just a 2-letter abbreviation in her calendar. But it wasn't about seating charts or invitations. It was about me, specifically what I was going to do with myself now that I was, in his words, getting to that age. That age, I raised him, alone, worked double shifts, paid off this house dollar by painful dollar. I wasn't rich, but I had my retirement, my dignity, my rhythm. I walked with a cane now, sure, but I still drove, still cooked, still danced when Aretha came on the radio. And now he sat there explaining things to me like I was furniture that needed rearranging. There were 2 options, he said. 2 generous options. I could move in with him and his fiancée. They had space. Well, sort of. I'd take the guest room help with errands, cooking, and future childcare. Kind of like a win-win, he said, smiling like it was a sales pitch. Or if I wasn't comfortable with that, there was another idea. I could give him my savings, just as a head start. Just enough to help with the house, the wedding, the future. Just enough to make things easier for all of us. Then he picked up his tea and sipped it. Mine stayed untouched. My son was offering me a job in my old age, or a buyout from his life. And I sat there with my hands folded in my lap, thinking about how the pot roast was already cooling, how the napkins looked too formal for this, and how I had somehow become the afterthought in my own life story. He thought he was offering me a future. But what I heard was, "You're either useful to me or you're not needed at all. What would you have done? Would you have asked for time? Protested, cried." I didn't do any of those things. I just looked down at my tea, now growing colder by the second, and thought, not yet, I'm not done yet. I always thought betrayal would come with a slam of the door, a shouting match, or at least a tear or two. But no, it came over roast beef and baby carrots with my son, politely chewing his food like he hadn't just gutted me. I mean, you'd be with family mom, he said, cutting his meat into perfect squares. You'd have a role, a purpose. As if raising him hadn't already been my life's purpose. As if the 42 years since his birth hadn't already been packed with sacrifice worry and the kind of love that keeps you up all night and makes you soft where the world hardens you. Carly thinks it's a great idea, he added. She even looked up some mobility aids you might need for the stairs. I blinked. Mobility aids? I don't even use the cane inside my house. He hadn't asked how I'd been feeling lately. Hadn't asked if I'd seen the doctor or if I'd needed anything at all. He just assumed I was slowing down and ready to be handled. Ready to be used. Of course, if you're not up for it, he trailed off, lifting his phone to check something. There's always option 2. Totally your call. Option 2. The way he said it made it sound like a menu item. Retirement fund a la carte. Served warm, garnished with guilt. He leaned back and smiled, but I saw the way his fingers fidgeted under the table. He was nervous not because he was offering me a choice, but because he thought I might say no. And he didn't want to hear no. We're not asking for all of it, he said too quickly. Just the bigger part. We could put it in a joint account for the wedding and a down payment. You'd still have a bit left, of course. A bit? My entire life savings reduced to a slice I'd get to keep if I handed over the rest like a donation to his future. It was the most polite form of theft I'd ever experienced. I set my fork down. My hands were shaking slightly, so I folded them together. I didn't want him to see. I see, I said quietly. Just think about it, he said, already wiping his mouth and reaching for his phone again. No pressure, but there was pressure. There always had been. Not from the world, but from him. From the moment he got older and sharper and more successful. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped being the mother who gave him everything and started becoming the woman he quietly judged for not keeping up. I looked at him across the table, his tailored shirt, his expensive watch, the phone that never left his side, and wondered when he had decided I was a burden instead of a blessing, and why I hadn't seen it coming. He stood to leave not long after, barely touched the roast. He said something about a meeting with the florist, promised to call me later in the week, kissed the top of my head, as if he were doing me a favor. Let me know what you decide, he said from the door, but the sooner the better. The door clicked shut behind him. The roast sat in silence. The tea had gone cold again. I sat there listening to the refrigerator hum and the clock tick, and for the first time in years, I felt small in my own home. Used, measured, appraised. I stood up, walked to the sink, and ran hot water over the dishes. My hands ached slightly from the warmth, but I welcomed it. The sting of heat was a better feeling than numbness. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just cleaned up the meal like I had done 1,000 Sundays before. But this time, I didn't wrap the leftovers. I scraped every bit of that roast into the garbage and dropped the lid on the bin like I was sealing a chapter shut. Then I poured myself a new cup of tea, sat down at the table again, and whispered out loud to no one. He thinks I'm out of options. But he was wrong. The options were mine to create now, not his to give. Not anymore. The first time I met Carly, she wore a white blouse with sleeves that didn't quite cover her wrists and a pair of heels too tall for a casual lunch. It was a Tuesday, and my son brought her over with less warning than you'd give for a pizza delivery. Thought we'd drop by, he'd said on the phone. She introduced herself with a smile that looked like it had been practiced in front of a mirror. "Call me Carly," she'd said, brushing past me and immediately scanning the living room like she was inspecting a model home she hadn't decided on yet. Her voice was syrupy, her perfume sharp and cold, something expensive and sterile. I remember she didn't compliment the house, didn't ask about the quilt on the back of the sofa or the hummingbird feeder outside the window. What she did ask was, "Do you live here all alone?" I smiled then. I had to, because the way she said alone was like saying abandoned. "Yes," I answered, "and quite well, thank you." She blinked and moved on. That was Carly. She didn't pause long enough to hear you. She was always moving to the next topic, the next improvement, the next advantage. She worked in PR, or was it HR, some job that involved manipulating people gently with keywords and cashmere. She wore control like lipstick flawlessly and with confidence. That day she brought a bottle of wine as a little something, but she didn't drink any. Said it gave her headaches. She just sat there, legs crossed, asking polite questions with hard edges. "Do you drive much these days? Do you cook often? Are there stairs here?" It was like being interviewed for a job I hadn't applied for. Later, I told my friend Sharon over the phone she's the kind of girl who smells like power and walks like she already owns the room. Sharon said, "So he's marrying his boss." "No," I said, staring at the lipstick ring she'd left on her wine glass. "He's marrying his supervisor." That was almost a year ago. They moved fast. Engagement within 6 months. House hunting by 7. Talk of kids already in the mix. And somewhere along the way she looked at me changed from polite curiosity to strategic planning. The last time they visited together, she brought a binder. An actual binder. It had tabs. One tab said household contributions. Another living arrangements. My son sat there beside her nodding as she outlined how intergenerational living is gaining popularity and how Eleanor's presence would provide invaluable stability for the future baby. She even used the word asset when referring to me. Not mother, not woman, not family. Asset. That's when I stopped hearing her voice and started listening to what my own body was doing. My heart had gone quiet in that tight, bracing way. My hands were cold. I folded them tightly in my lap so she wouldn't see them shaking. I wanted to scream, or laugh, or cry, but I did none of those things. I smiled. I nodded. I played the polite aging woman they expected me to be. But I wasn't deaf, and I wasn't dead. Carly left that day with a list of next steps and an air kiss that never touched my skin. I closed the door behind her and locked it before the echo of her heels disappeared down my walkway. She was efficient. I'll give her that. She was smart, driven, goal-oriented. She just didn't know who she was dealing with. She thought I was just the old lady in the corner of their bright new life. But I've been the foundation for 40 years. The cook, the cleaner, the nurse, the bill payer, the counselor. I've been the storm shelter and the furnace. She thinks I'm a spare part. But I am the engine. That night, I pulled out my photo album, the old one. The one with the cracked spine and yellowed pages. I looked at baby pictures, school portraits, a younger version of my son with wild hair and scraped knees and eyes that used to soften when they looked at me. Now those same eyes harden when I say something inconvenient. Somewhere between kindergarten and career, I lost him. Or maybe he let go of me. Carly didn't change him, no. She just gave him permission to treat me the way he already wanted to. And I can't fight for someone who doesn't want me to win. But I can walk away. And that's exactly what I was starting to consider. If you were in my shoes sitting at that kitchen table watching your own child drift into someone else's control, what would you do? It was supposed to be a friendly lunch, just the 3 of us. I'd agreed to meet them at a bistro downtown, a place with linen napkins, overpriced salads, and a menu that tried too hard to sound European. Carly had picked it, of course. She greeted me with that same glossy smile and a tight embrace that smelled like rosemary and calculated charm. My son kissed my cheek but didn't make eye contact. I knew something was coming. That little wrinkle between his eyebrows, he gets it when he's bracing for a difficult conversation. We ordered. She got a salad. He got the salmon. I asked for soup. They both looked at me like I'd chosen the wrong answer. It didn't take long. Once the waitress left, Carly leaned forward, folding her hands over her purse, like she was about to negotiate a business deal. "Eleanor," she said, and I immediately knew she was about to say something I wouldn't like. She only uses my full name when she's about to make me small. "We've been thinking," she said, "about the future, about where everyone fits in, and we really want to offer you something meaningful." I didn't say anything, just tilted my head slightly. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're an incredible cook, and you have so much experience managing a household. I mean, raising a child alone, that's no small feat." Still no answer from me. I was waiting for the catch. So she continued, "We thought it could be a wonderful idea if you came to live with us. We have the guest room, and of course you'd have your own space. And in exchange, well, we thought you could help out. Just a little. Help out. Just a little." My son picked up where she left off. Take some of the pressure off. With the baby coming next year, it'll be a lot. So maybe you could cook during the week, help Carly with grocery runs, watch the baby sometimes. "And laundry," she added too quickly. "If it's not too much, you've got such a system already, I'm sure." She was complimenting me like someone flatters a housekeeper during an interview. I waited for her to say what she really meant. I didn't have to wait long. I mean, she said with a little laugh, "You'd be earning your keep, of course." There it was. Earn your keep. I blinked slowly. My soup arrived. I stirred it just to have something to do with my hands, but my appetite was gone. I looked at my son. He wasn't looking at me. He was cutting his salmon, the corners of his mouth twitching like he wanted to smile, but knew better. Knew I wasn't smiling. They were offering me a room in exchange for my usefulness. Not my love, not my company, my services. And it wasn't an offer, it was a thinly veiled command. A kind one dressed up in compliments and false gratitude. But a command all the same. You wouldn't have to worry about anything my son added. No bills, no stress, just pitch in where you can. He didn't mean where you can. He meant everything. Carly sipped her tea. We'd all be helping each other. It's a modern family approach. I looked down at the soup, then back up at them. And in that moment, I saw it clearly. They didn't see me as a mother anymore. They saw me as a resource. A nanny, a maid, a personal chef, a quiet fixture in their house who would keep things running while they climbed the ladder and smiled for holiday photos. And if I got sick, if I needed help, what then? Would I still be welcome, or would I have outlived my usefulness? I'd spent decades saying yes, putting myself last, stretching every dollar, and carrying burdens I never let my son see. And now he wanted me to pack up the last pieces of myself and serve them to his new family like a tray of canapes. I sat very still. I didn't say no, but I didn't say yes, because something in me had started to shift. It was quiet like the creak of old floorboards just before they split. A slow, aching awareness. They thought I needed them. But maybe, just maybe they needed me far more. And maybe that's where my power had been hiding all along. What would you have said? Would you have accepted the room, the chores, the conditional love? Or would you have waited like I did for the next moment to draw your own line? I thought the worst of it was over. I thought I had heard the most painful version of their plan, the move in with us and help out pitch, dressed up like generosity. But Carly had one more idea tucked behind her smile, and it was uglier than anything she'd said so far. It came after I didn't respond. I just stirred my soup and looked out the window. Silence doesn't sit well with people who crave control. It makes them nervous, makes them fidget. So Carly leaned in again and tried another route. Of course, she said softly, if you're not ready for that kind of arrangement. We completely understand. I glanced up. She tilted her head. There's always the other option. My son looked up from his plate at that, as if he knew what was coming but didn't want to be the one to say it. So she said it for him. I mean, it's just a thought. She began playing with her bracelet like it was a metronome. You've been so wise with money, so responsible. And we thought, well, if you're more comfortable staying in your own space, maybe you'd consider helping us in a different way. The pause was so deliberate it hurt. She went on soft and breezy like she was offering me a ride home from church, a financial gift, just something to give us a real head start. The house, the wedding. You know, life's just gotten so expensive, and it's not like you need much now, right? I couldn't breathe for a second. Not need much. She didn't mean just the car or the house. She meant living, as if the chapter of my life worth investing in had already ended. You'd still have a cushion, she said, but it would mean everything to us. It's just a way you could support our future even from your own home. Support their future by stripping mine away. My son cleared his throat. We'd put it to good use, Mom. Promise. We're not just asking for money, we're asking for a partnership. A partnership. I had partnered in his life since he was born. Changed every diaper, worked overtime to pay for every field trip and dental bill. I gave him everything I had, and when there was nothing left, I gave more. And now he wanted what little remained. Not even to survive, but to thrive without me. I sat there trying to process it all. The casual cruelty of their tone, the way they dressed up their request in pretty words, generosity, support, gift, like that made it less of a demand. I'd have to think about that, I said quietly. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. Carly beamed. Of course, take your time. We'd never pressure you. But they were already pressuring me. Every moment, every word, every implication. You're not getting any younger. You don't need much. You'd still have something left. They had already decided I was no longer the hero of my own story, just the footnote, the donor, the afterthought. The checkbook. The disposable. I finished my soup in silence. The restaurant buzzed around us waitresses laughing at the bar, a baby crying 2 tables over the clink of forks and wine glasses, but all of it sounded distant, muffled. When they dropped me off afterward, Carly leaned out of the car and said, "We'll talk again soon." "You're so generous, Eleanor, really." And then they were gone. The moment the door shut behind me, I leaned my back against it and finally exhaled. I looked around at the house I had built, filled with things I chose. Books I loved, curtains I'd hemmed myself, a lifetime of quiet labor that no one seemed to see anymore. And I felt it not just sadness, but insult. Not the kind that bruises, but the kind that slices clean. The kind you don't notice until later when the sting comes back during a quiet moment and you suddenly realize you've been bleeding. They didn't want to take care of me. They wanted to use me while they climbed, smiled, posed for photos with matching pajamas, and posted captions about blessings. And I was just supposed to disappear in the background of all of it. But I had more power than they thought. They'd made a mistake. They gave me a choice. And no matter how much they tried to dress it up, I was never going to choose between servitude and surrender. I had already decided I would choose something else, something neither of them had ever considered. Something that didn't involve begging to be treated like a person. If you were me sitting alone in your home, your child treating you like a vault or a servant, would you keep trying? Or would you finally set yourself free? The house felt different that night. Too still. Too clean. Like everything inside had already given up. The teacup from dinner sat in the sink, dried rings of milk and memory clinging to the porcelain. I hadn't washed it. Couldn't. My hands wouldn't move. My thoughts were louder than the ticking clock above the stove, and the clock was loud enough to feel like a hammer. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces. My son with that tight corporate smile trained tidy empty. And Carly nodding beside him, like she was giving a quarterly report. Both of them acting like their proposition was the kindest thing anyone had ever offered me. As if asking your mother to either scrub your toilets or finance your wedding was some act of enlightened modern family planning. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, feeling the weight of their words press into my chest. "You'll have to earn your keep. A financial gift would really help." I thought about all the years I had worked for a life that wouldn't leave me stranded. I'd done the math. I knew exactly how long my savings would last me modestly, yes, but securely. I didn't need cruises or diamonds. I needed peace. I needed my autonomy. My son seemed to think I needed a family-shaped cage or a permission slip to exist. I turned over and looked at the photograph on my nightstand. It was of us, my son and me, when he was 7. He was missing a tooth and grinning with pure joy sitting on my lap, arms looped around my neck. That version of him still lived inside my heart, the one who ran to me when he scraped his knees, the one who made me macaroni necklaces and cards that said, "Mommy is my hero." Where had that boy gone? Had I missed the moment he stopped needing me? Had I missed the moment he stopped loving me? Or had I just refused to see it? The grief rolled in quietly. Not loud, not wet and dramatic, just a deep ache like the air had changed, and my lungs no longer knew how to breathe it. I remembered how I used to sleep through anything storms, sirens, even heartbreak. But now every little sound seemed to scratch against me. The groan of the house settling, the wind brushing the windows. Even the fridge humming felt like a question I couldn't answer. I got up around 2:00 a.m. and walked to the kitchen. I didn't turn on any lights, just padded across the floor and poured a glass of water. My reflection in the window startled me. I looked older than I felt smaller somehow. Not like a woman who had carried a household for 4 decades. More like someone they'd already counted out. And then I whispered it to the dark. "I'm not done yet." It surprised me how steady my voice sounded. No tears, no tremble. I said it again firmer this time. "I'm not done yet." I wasn't going to be their afterthought, their backup plan, their unpaid help. I was going to reclaim whatever time I had left. Not just exist, but live. That night, I sat at the table and opened my ledger, the one I kept hidden in the cabinet beneath the books where I tracked everything from my expenses to my emergency stash. It was neat, exact, just like me. I ran the numbers 3 times. And when I finished, I realized something startling. I didn't need them. Not their house, not their approval, not even their calls, which had grown less frequent and more transactional over the years. What I needed was space, a different kind of freedom, a life that wasn't shaped around what someone else expected from me, but what I expected from me. I pulled out a notebook and wrote a list, just for myself, things I will not do anymore. Apologize for existing, feel guilty for saying no, pretend I don't notice the insults tucked into kindness, minimize what I've survived, trade respect for proximity. I closed the notebook. Then I opened my laptop and typed into the search bar independent living options near me. It was the first step. It felt like a revolution. I didn't sleep at all that night, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel tired. Have you ever had a moment like that where the very thing that should have broken you instead made you braver? The next morning, I dressed slowly. Not because I was tired, but because everything about the day ahead felt sacred, quietly defiant. I pulled on my best blouse, the blue one with little pearl buttons, the one I'd bought for no reason one spring and never had the occasion to wear. I brushed my hair back into a neat bun dabbed on a touch of lipstick and looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't look like a woman about to make a scene. I looked like a woman preparing to protect herself. The bank was only 5 blocks from my house. I took my time walking there, cane in hand, my purse clutched close. The leaves had started to turn flashes of orange and rust dancing along the sidewalk. The air smelled like cinnamon and wood smoke. If I closed my eyes, I could almost pretend I was walking toward a warm bakery. But I wasn't. I was walking toward a line I was about to draw in permanent ink. The teller greeted me by name Janice. She'd worked there for years, always chipper, always wearing some sparkly brooch, like it was part of the uniform. "Morning, Eleanor," she said with a wide smile. "What can I do for you today?" I smiled back. "I need to see someone about restructuring some of my accounts." Her smile faltered just a hair. "Everything okay?" I hesitated, then gave her the kind of look women give each other when they've both been through something. "Just making sure things are secured." She nodded like she understood more than she said and led me to a quiet office in the back. I sat across from a young man named Travis. He was polite, called me ma'am, and typed everything so fast his keyboard sounded like rain. I handed over the folders I'd prepared copies of statements, my will, the account numbers I'd carefully organized the night before. "I want to update the beneficiaries," I said, placing a firm finger on the line. "And I want to set limits on withdrawal authorizations." He looked up. "Of course, any particular concerns?" I paused, and then I told him the truth. "My son thinks I'll hand over what I've worked for because I'm old. He thinks I won't notice the pressure. But I've noticed." Travis was still for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. "We'll make sure everything's protected, ma'am, however you want it." He didn't blink twice, didn't treat me like a confused woman reacting emotionally. He just got to work. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Respected. We spent an hour rearranging it all, moving a portion to a separate credit union, placing holds that required my personal signature for all future changes, redefining beneficiaries. Every click of his mouse was a sentence in my declaration. I am not your property. I am not your plan B. I am not your backup fund. When we finished, Travis printed out a clean, organized packet and slid it across to me. "Is there anything else I can help with?" "Yes," I said, slipping the papers into my purse. "Can you recommend a good place for seniors who still want to live?" He blinked. "You mean like a retirement home?" "No," I said, "a retirement life." He smiled for real then. "Actually, I know just the place." That's how I got the brochure. It was tucked between a stack of community flyers on the way out. White cover, big gold lettering. "Willow Ridge, where freedom meets comfort." Inside were glossy pictures of wide halls, big windows, a garden path. There were smiling women playing cards, men walking their dogs, couples laughing over wine. Not staged laughter, not sad eyes in plastic chairs. Real joy. I clutched the brochure like it was a secret map to somewhere no one had ever told me existed. By the time I stepped back outside, the wind had picked up. Leaves danced across my shoes as if the world was celebrating with me. I wasn't sure what I'd do next. Not yet, but I knew what I wouldn't do. I wouldn't give away my independence for a mattress in someone's guest room. I wouldn't hand over my money like a tip for years of ungratefulness. I wouldn't let myself be managed, minimized, or made small. My son had given me 2 choices, serve or surrender. But there was a third, and I was walking toward it. If you'd been in that bank with me watching the line between silence and strength get crossed, what would you have done? It was still in my purse when I got home. The brochure. I hadn't opened it, yet hadn't dared. Something about it felt too powerful, too final. Like peeking at a door I wasn't sure I was allowed to walk through. It stayed there all night, sandwiched between my checkbook and a half-used tube of hand cream. But the next morning, after my tea was warm again and the sun started pouring through the kitchen window in soft ribbons, I sat down at the table and opened it. Willow Ridge, that was the name. Printed in soft gold script, nestled at the top of the page like a quiet promise. Where freedom meets comfort, it said again beneath it. There were photos of wide sunlit hallways, cheerful dining rooms, bookshelves lined with paperbacks, and people like me smiling without performing. I turned each page slowly, not because I was skeptical, but because something in me was waking up, and it had been asleep for a long, long time. There was a photo of a woman playing the piano with her eyes closed, another of a man tending a garden bed full of tomatoes. In the corner of one page, a group of residents were sitting by a fireplace with mugs in hand and thick blankets across their laps. They looked like they belonged there, not tolerated, not babysat, not pitied. Belonged. That word alone nearly undid me. I hadn't felt that in years. Not since before my son met Carly. Not since before he started talking to me like I was a logistical problem that needed solving. Somewhere along the way, I had gone from mom to her in his vocabulary, from love to liability. But this place, Willow Ridge, it didn't look like a warehouse for the discarded. It looked like a beginning. Still, a part of me fought back, old instincts, the voice that said, don't spend money on yourself, don't be selfish, don't make waves, be grateful they even offered. That voice sounded a lot like my late mother's and my ex-husband's. And if I'm being honest, sometimes even my own. But another voice had started whispering too, a new one, or maybe just one I'd buried under years of selflessness. That voice said, you've earned this. You deserve more than survival. I folded the brochure and set it beside my tea. I didn't call them that day. I didn't pack a bag or write a letter, but I did something even more important. I allowed myself to imagine it. To imagine waking up somewhere that wasn't shaped by obligation or pity. To imagine being asked, what would you like to do today, instead of, can you cook, clean, babysit? To imagine sleeping without resentment creeping in through the walls. Later that afternoon, Sharon came by. She's been my neighbor for 23 years, ever since her husband passed, and she decided she'd rather plant roses than chase men. She brought over lemon bars and saw the brochure sitting on the table. Oh, she said, eyebrows rising. Willow Ridge. I nodded. She sat down slowly, placing the tin between us. I have a friend there, Ruth. They play poker every Wednesday and eat like royalty. I smiled. Does it feel like a retirement home? Sharon snorted. Feels like a country club with better casseroles. They've got wine tastings and yoga, and the best part, no one's yelling, Mom, every 10 minutes. We both laughed. Too loud, too long. Because it was true. She looked at me. Then, her smile softening. Are you thinking about it? I picked up the brochure again. I'm done thinking. Sharon reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Good. That night I sat by the window long after the streetlights came on. The brochure was back in my lap, warm from my hands. I ran my fingers across the gold lettering and let my eyes close. For the first time in a long while, I didn't imagine myself waiting for someone to call, or apologize, or change. I imagined myself walking down a hallway where I didn't have to explain who I was or justify why I needed peace. A place where I was just me. If you were holding that brochure, if you had the chance to rewrite the last chapter of your life, not as someone's afterthought, but as your own protagonist, wouldn't you take it? I booked the tour 2 days later. The woman on the phone. Her name was Meredith, had a voice like warm honey, and didn't once call me sweetie or ma'am. She asked what time I'd prefer to come in, told me to wear something comfortable, and said lunch would be on them if I stayed long enough. "I think you'll like it here," she said. "We're not what people expect." She was right. Willow Ridge wasn't polished to the point of sterility. It wasn't trying to be a hotel. It didn't feel like a place where people went to disappear. It felt like somewhere they went to reappear. From the moment I stepped inside, something in my chest loosened. There were soft chairs, real books, a front desk that looked like it belonged in a cozy inn, not a hospital. Someone was playing jazz in the courtyard. Live jazz, not a recording. And the air smelled like fresh bread and lavender, not bleach. Meredith met me with a clipboard and a kind smile. "You must be Eleanor." No one had said my name like that in a while, not with respect, not with recognition. As she led me through the halls, I noticed something strange. People were smiling. Not the forced, toothy kind, but the sort that comes from feeling safe, from feeling seen. We passed a card game in progress. A woman sketching by the window, a man laughing over something on a tablet. And no one looked at me like I was being evaluated. No one asked what I could offer them. No one asked me if I could cook or clean or watch their child. They just nodded, like they were saying, "Welcome. We've been expecting you." Meredith showed me the rooms next each one with its own personality. Not cookie cutter, not hospital grade. Soft rugs, big windows, beds with real headboards, bathrooms with deep tubs, little patios that looked out over gardens instead of parking lots. "This one's open next month," she said, tapping a doorframe gently. I stepped inside. Light poured through the curtains. There was a rocking chair by the window, a small bookshelf built into the wall, and a soft green quilt folded across the bed. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I let it out. "It's yours if you want it," she said. I turned, slowly ran my hand along the back of the chair and whispered, "No one bosses me anymore." She smiled gently like she'd heard that one before. We had lunch in the dining room. No plastic trays, no microwaved meatloaf. I ordered a spinach quiche with fruit and iced tea. They brought it out on real dishes with silverware that didn't bend when you pressed down. "I don't feel old here," I said without thinking. "You're not," Meredith said. "You're alive." After lunch, I sat by the fire for a while and listened. Not to the music or the laughter or the conversations happening around me. I listened to something quieter, the voice inside me that had grown so small I'd almost forgotten it existed. It was humming again. By the time I left, I had all the paperwork in my purse and a new feeling in my bones. Not fear, not doubt, but readiness. I didn't tell my son. I didn't tell Carly. I didn't ask for advice or permission or a second opinion. This was my decision. I went home, stood in the middle of my living room, and let the silence press against me one last time. The walls were familiar. The photos still hung. My quilt was still draped across the couch. But the house didn't feel like safety anymore. It felt like a cage with curtains. I sat at my kitchen table, folded my hands, and whispered the words I hadn't let myself believe until that moment. I'm allowed to choose me. That night, I slept through the night for the first time in months. No thoughts about guilt. No regrets about loyalty. No echo of my son's voice asking for money or obedience. Just sleep. Real, uninterrupted sleep. And a sense that the next chapter was already unfolding. If you had the keys to a life where you weren't defined by who needed you or what they expected, if you could build something just for you, would you keep waiting for someone else to give you permission to begin again? There's a strange kind of peace in planning your own quiet escape. No drama, no confrontation, just decision, sharp and clean. I started packing that Sunday morning. The rain was tapping gently at the windows, the sky low and gray, the way it always is when something big begins or ends. I moved through each room like a visitor in my own home, touching things not with sadness, but with intention. This wasn't abandonment. It was liberation. I pulled out 3 suitcases from the back of the closet, the nice ones I hadn't used in years, the ones with wheels that still squeaked slightly on hardwood floors. I didn't rush. I folded everything with care. Blouses, cardigans, my favorite navy dress, slippers, the soft gray scarf my sister gave me before she passed, The old quilt I made when my son was in middle school, the one he never wanted for himself. And then I packed something that surprised even me, my red heels. I hadn't worn them since my retirement party, but something in me said, bring them. You're not done with beauty. The drawers came next. I went through them methodically. Old receipts, birthday cards from people I hadn't heard from in years, an envelope of Polaroids from the 80s. I kept a few, let the rest go. I packed one photo of my son, just one. The one where he was still small enough to sit in my lap and laugh with his whole face. The rest I left behind. By mid-afternoon, the house had a strange emptiness. Not like someone was leaving, but like someone had already gone. The kitchen was last. I wiped the counters one final time, ran my hand along the edge of the table where I used to sit paying bills late into the night. I opened the cabinet where I kept the old tea tins and pulled out my favorite 1 Earl Grey, the kind I never shared because it was just mine. And I left everything else. Not because I didn't love it, but because I didn't need it anymore. Not the weight, not the obligation, not the feeling of standing in someone else's waiting room hoping to be chosen. I wrote a note not for my son, but for myself. I folded it and tucked it into my wallet. It read, "You left quietly with grace," and that was louder than any goodbye could ever be. I didn't call Sharon. I didn't say farewell to the neighbors. I didn't want to explain what I was doing. I wanted it to be mine, just mine. The first selfish, sacred thing I'd done in years. That night I made tea, not because I needed the comfort, but because I wanted to watch it steam in my cup while I sat in the quiet house and said thank you to the walls, to the floor, to the life that carried me this far. I wasn't bitter, not anymore. I wasn't angry. I was simply done. And not done like finished, done like ready. I texted Meredith and confirmed the move-in date. I reserved a small moving van. No help from my son, no favors from Carly, no long explanations or performances of gratitude. They had never asked me what I wanted, and now they never would need to. Because I had chosen. They gave me 2 doors serve or surrender. But I had found a third, and I was walking through it with my head high, my soul light, and my red heels packed for whatever came next. If you were standing at the edge of a life that had always belonged to others, if your hands finally had the keys to freedom, would you walk out quietly too? Or would you wait to be thanked before you were allowed to leave? I thought about not telling him at all. Just disappearing into my new life like a breeze slipping under the door. Let him figure it out when he tried to call and couldn't reach me, or when the next holiday came and I wasn't sitting in the corner like a forgotten centerpiece. But that would have made me cruel. And I'm not cruel. I'm just done begging to be seen. So instead, I sat at my kitchen table, half-packed boxes all around me, the last echoes of my old life stacked in neat, silent corners, and picked up my phone. I didn't want to call him live. I couldn't bear to hear that strained, clipped tone in his voice again, the one that says he's barely listening, that he already knows what's best for me. So I waited until I knew he'd be at work, straight to voicemail. I rehearsed the words in my head once, then I pressed record. "Hi, it's me, your mother. I hope you're well." My voice trembled a little, but I didn't stop. I've decided to do something for myself, something you may not understand, and that's all right. I've spent a long time making everyone else comfortable, and somewhere along the way, I forgot what it felt like to be free. I paused, steadying my breath. I'm moving, not with you, not near you, and not with a suitcase full of apologies. I'm moving somewhere where I don't have to be useful to be welcome. I could feel tears prickling in my eyes, but they didn't fall. I'm not angry with you, but I am disappointed. Not just in what you asked of me, but in what you assumed I'd give. You saw me as a safety net, as a backup plan, but I am not that. I am not a burden or a checkbook or a live-in maid. I looked down at the photo I'd kept the one of us in the park when he still had jelly on his face and called me mama like it was a magic word. I raised you to stand on your own, and now I'm standing on mine. Maybe one day you'll understand that this wasn't abandonment. It was self-respect. Another pause. If you need to reach me, you can. But I won't be coming to serve, and I won't be giving anything else but love. If love is what you want, my door is open. The silence that followed was longer than the message itself. I didn't erase it. I didn't add anything. I just pressed send, and then I set the phone down gently like it was something fragile that no longer had power over me. The rest of the day moved quietly. I packed the last items, called the movers, labeled the boxes with neat handwriting. I didn't flinch when I passed his old bedroom or when I saw the indentation on the couch where he used to curl up during thunderstorms. Those memories belonged to me, but they didn't define me. The next chapter wasn't going to be built on remember when, it would be built on what now. That night, he didn't call back. Not immediately. I didn't expect him to. He was probably angry, confused. Maybe Carly was coaching him on how to respond. Maybe he'd show up. Maybe he wouldn't. But I didn't care, not in the bitter way, but in the clear, settled way. I had said what I needed to say. And I hadn't screamed. I hadn't begged. I hadn't folded myself into a version of the mother he wanted. I had chosen peace. And peace never raises its voice. Would you have done the same? If the person you loved more than anything had turned you into a transaction, would you have whispered your goodbye into the silence too? The sun rose through gauzy curtains, and for the first time in years, I didn't wake to a list in my head. No to-dos, no appointments, no guilt about the day before, or dread about the one ahead. Just warmth, light, the faint clatter of someone wheeling a breakfast cart down the hall. I lay there a while, not because I was tired, but because I could. There was no one waiting on me. No one expecting coffee or help with errands or an old woman to be quiet in the corner of their bright young life. The silence in this place didn't feel heavy. It felt like an exhale. Willow Ridge had become mine overnight. My boxes had arrived neatly. A kind aide named Sonia helped me unpack the essentials clothes, my teacup, my books, my framed photo of the magnolia tree in my backyard. I left the photo of my son wrapped and tucked at the bottom, not out of bitterness, but because I didn't need his face watching over this new beginning. I rose slowly, slipping my feet into house shoes, and walked to the little balcony just off my room. It overlooked the courtyard where someone was already watering the roses. The air smelled like honey and cut grass. Below me, 2 residents sat in wicker chairs chatting with newspapers in hand. Another walked slowly along the path with a golden retriever wagging along beside him. No one looked rushed. No one looked hidden. This was not a place you came to fade. This was a place you came to arrive. Breakfast was in the garden room. Fresh fruit, warm croissants, and strong coffee that didn't taste like regret. People nodded politely as I entered. Some smiled, some kept reading. No one asked me who I was here to visit. They knew. I took a seat by the window. Across from me, a woman with soft white curls and sparkling eyes was knitting a scarf the color of red wine. First day, she asked without looking up. I nodded. Breathe deep, she said. It only gets better. I smiled. Not the tight kind, the real kind. The one that reaches all the way to the chest. After breakfast, I wandered the halls. There was a small library on the second floor, its shelves rich with fiction poetry and cookbooks that made me ache with memory. A sign-up sheet listed all sorts of classes, watercolor Tai Chi memoir writing. I ran my fingers over the paper, the names scribbled in neat cursive. I could be someone new here. Or I could be myself for the first time in a long time. Later that afternoon, I sat in the courtyard with a book I didn't open. The sun filtered through the trees in slow-moving shadows. A young staff member offered me tea, and I accepted it not out of need, but joy. No one hovered, no one fussed, and yet I wasn't alone. I watched as a man sat down beside his wife and read to her from a hardback book. She didn't respond, just smiled, eyes closed. I watched another woman feed bits of her toast to the birds near the fountain. It was all so gentle, so beautifully uneventful. I think people forget that peace is not boring. Peace is the reward. As the sun began to dip behind the roofline, a breeze rolled through the trees, rustling the ivy along the courtyard walls. I held the teacup a little tighter and let the moment stretch. Not once that day did anyone ask what I could do for them. They asked what I liked, what I needed, what brought me joy. And I realized this wasn't just a building. It was a line in the sand. This was what it felt like to be on my side of the line. If you woke up tomorrow and had nothing left to prove, no one left to serve, no expectations weighing down your shoulders, Would you sit quietly and let the sun find your face? 2. Would you let peace hold you? I knew it was only a matter of time. The call came 3 days after I moved in. I let it ring. And then that evening, just before dinner, while I was setting a puzzle piece into a nearly complete picture of a countryside cottage, I saw him, standing in the lobby of Willow Ridge, mouth-tight hands on his hips, jaw locked like a vault. My son. He looked out of place here. Too sharp, too fast. His suit was still creased from work, and he held his phone like a weapon. A few residents glanced at him, then politely turned away. Anger doesn't go far here. It doesn't catch like it does out in the world. It just fizzles. I didn't rush over. I took my time walking to him. He saw me and stiffened. "Mom," he said sharply like a reprimand. "What the hell is this?" I looked up at him, then past him at the soft lighting, the warm rug beneath our feet, the soft humming of someone playing piano somewhere down the hall. "This," I said gently, "is my new home." He blinked. "You didn't even tell me. You left." Just like that. I tilted my head. I left a voicemail. I spoke honestly. He scoffed. "You didn't even give me a chance to explain." "To explain why you asked me to either serve your wife or give you all of my savings?" I asked softly. No explanation was necessary. He ran his hand through his hair, clearly trying to keep himself from saying the wrong thing, but it was too late for damage control. "I never said it like that," he muttered. "No," I agreed. "You didn't. You said it in a way that let you feel good about it." He was quiet. He shifted his weight. And for the first time, I saw something under the frustration. Panic. "I just thought we could help each other," he said finally. "You're alone, and we." "I'm not alone," I interrupted. He stared at me. "I may live alone, but I am not lonely. There's a difference. I was lonelier in my own house, sitting by the phone, waiting for a son who didn't call than I've ever been here. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't angry. I was just clear." He swallowed hard. His eyes darted to the brochure on the front table. "Is this really what you want?" he asked. It wasn't sarcasm. It was real now. A tremble at the edge of his voice. A little boy under the grown man. And I saw him, not the cold son who'd measured my worth, but the scared boy who didn't know how to be kind without control. "Yes," I said simply. "This is what I want." He looked around again, took in the plants, the people laughing down the hall, the faint smell of cinnamon from the kitchen. And I think he finally understood. He couldn't offer me this. Not peace, not dignity, not respect. "I thought you needed me," he said, quieter now. I gave him a soft smile. I needed myself, and I finally found her. There were no hugs, no dramatic apology, just a silence that held the weight of everything between us. He nodded once, then turned to go. He didn't say goodbye, but I didn't need him to. I returned to my puzzle, sat down, pressed the final corner piece into place. It fit perfectly, and so did I. If the person who broke your heart showed up expecting to be forgiven without ever saying they were sorry, would you open the door again? Or would you stay seated calm and whole in the life you built without them? It's funny how fast life can begin again when no one is telling you who to be. At Willow Ridge, there are no expectations wrapped in smiles, no quiet calculations behind every conversation. No one here asks how much I can give. They just ask if I want to join them for bridge, or if I prefer my eggs scrambled or poached, or whether I'd like a seat by the window during lunch. No performance, just presence. On Tuesdays, I walk with Grace around the rose garden. She used to be a music teacher. Wears purple every day because she says it makes her feel mischievous. She talks about her late husband like he's still walking beside her, and sometimes she laughs so hard she has to stop and hold her side. On Thursdays, there's poetry in the library. I don't read aloud, but I listen. There's power in listening, in knowing no one is waiting for you to hurry up or clean something or hand over a checkbook. And Sundays are for pancakes and no alarm clocks, just sunshine and coffee that tastes like possibility. The other residents don't ask about my past unless I offer it. They don't press for the pain. They understand that everyone here carries something, a loss, a betrayal, a silence that got too heavy to hold. We don't unpack it all, we just sit beside it together. I told Grace one afternoon I feel like I got off a boat I didn't realize I was drowning on. She just nodded and said, We all did, honey. We aren't here to escape life. We're here to step into the part no one told us we were allowed to have. Freedom. Laughter. Friendship that isn't based on usefulness. One night after dinner, I found myself laughing so hard at a game of charades that tears rolled down my cheeks. Real tears, not from sorrow, but from something like joy rediscovered. And afterward, I sat in my room and whispered thank you to no one in particular. Not for the building, not for the meals, but for the reminder that I still exist outside of my roles. Not mother, not servant, not solution. Just me. They say older women disappear, but I think that's only true if we let ourselves be erased. Here I am, visible. Here I am allowed to take up space not as an obligation, but as a person. Carly hasn't called. My son sent a text saying he hoped I was adjusting well. I didn't reply, not out of spite, but because I didn't owe him comfort anymore. He had chosen to make me small. I had chosen to make myself whole. And now I spend my days with people who see me not what I can offer or what they can extract. Just me. Have you ever had that moment when you finally stopped shrinking to make others comfortable? And if not, what are you waiting for? The seasons changed slowly here, and so did I. It wasn't dramatic. No sudden realizations or grand declarations, just quiet shifts like leaves turning gold without fanfare, or the way your breathing softens when you finally stop holding it in. It had been nearly 6 weeks since I arrived at Willow Ridge. My suitcase was long unpacked, but it was my spirit that had finally settled. The woman who once stood in her kitchen weighing a future of servitude or surrender was no longer the one who woke up here every morning with the sun brushing her face. I wasn't who I used to be, and I was learning every day that that was more than okay. There was a strength in me I'd forgotten, not the kind that carries groceries or works double shifts, the kind that says no gently, the kind that walks away without guilt, the kind that doesn't shrink just because others refuse to grow. I had feared that choosing myself would mean choosing loneliness, but it didn't. It meant choosing honesty, peace, choice. Some nights I still think about my son. I wonder if he regrets what he said, or if Carly ever pauses to question the version of family she tried to build, one shaped like a hierarchy instead of a circle. But I don't dwell there, not anymore. Because I've come to understand something forgiveness doesn't always mean returning. Sometimes it simply means releasing, letting the pain go, but not the lesson. I wrote in my journal yesterday, love without respect is just debt. I read it again this morning and realized I no longer owed anyone anything but the truth of who I am now. The staff here know my name. The other residents know my laugh. And I know my worth. Somehow, in this little corner of the world where no one expected me to bloom again, I did. I planted roots in soft earth, not in obligation. I found warmth in strangers who never asked me to earn my seat. And I looked in the mirror and saw a woman who for the first time in years wasn't pretending. She was real. If you've ever stood on the edge of change, terrified it meant being alone, please know this. You are never too old to choose yourself. You are never too far gone to begin again, and you do not have to trade dignity for love, because the right kind of love will never ask you to. Life feels quieter now, not empty, just less frantic, less sharp around the edges. I sit by the window most mornings with my tea watching the light move through the trees. There's a calm to it, a slowness I once mistook for loneliness but now recognize as peace. Sometimes I write, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just sit and let myself be. I no longer measure my days by what I've done for others. I measure them by how I feel when I wake up. And lately, I feel free.